jet, not the ultra long range, but Challengers and Falcon 2000. For us, it's the biggest market, and I would say from the order, it's Saudi is number 1, the Dubai number 2, and Kuwait number 3 in terms of movements which we have to and from the region.
Okay, in terms of the size of the market, I think it's a very good question, and I've got 2 answers to that in generic terms. One is maybe $350 million a year in the Middle East, or the other answer is I don't know. Now, actually when I say I don't know, I would say we as an industry don't actually know the size of the market, and that I think presents both a challenge and an opportunity. And I think something that we as an industry need to look at is analytics, the study of information, gathering of information, and then the communication of accurate and meaningful information. So I think that's an opportunity. Where did I get the 350 million from? A number of assumptions. I looked at FBO, how many FBO movements in region? Good question. Dubai, accurate figures thanks to Dubai South. But across the region, it's a little more sketchy. So if you estimate, say, something like 100,000 movements across the region, how many of those are charter? Probably, if you asked me this question a couple of years ago, I'd have said 30%. This year, I'd say it's more like 35, maybe heading towards 40%. So if you do the math on that, probably your maths is better than mine, you've got 35,000 movements. How much is each movement generating? I guess it depends whether the movement started in Europe, or whether it was booked in Europe, whether it was a positioning leg, a live leg. If we did the assumption of $10,000 per movement, we end up with that number. But the bigger point here is the size of the market. I think we as an industry need to fully understand.
I like the fact you've done that calculation. What's the size of the value of the illegal charter market?
Okay, define illegal. I think that's a good question. Now, to me, illegal is where you're operating a private aircraft for hire or reward. That needs knocking on the head. I think it's relatively easy for regulators to step on that. Is it as big as it used to be? I think it's still there. If we're looking more at the grey market, which I guess is where the question comes, then again, what's the number in that? I don't know. What I would say is that having foreign operators in region it actually generates revenue for FBO, MRO, and the bigger ecosystems. So consequently, when it comes to regulating that, it needs to be with balance and creating a level playing field.
Actually, I've probably jumped in a bit. Do you want to just take us through very quickly NHS and explain how your business works? You've taken us through your fleet, but what's your biggest source of business?
I mean, we have, I would say, 3 different kinds of business. One is ACMI, which we do on regional aircraft, predominantly within Germany and Central Europe, where we fly a lot of soccer for the French league, for the German league. And beside this, aircraft management is our number 2 in business. But from a revenue perspective, actually, it's the charter. So half of our fleet is owned by ourselves. So when Youssef said before owning an asset doesn't work, and had the same discussion with Patrick from Lux last week, for us it works. So we have a pre-owned fleet, which we own and we put out for charter. We control that asset completely. We don't need owner's approval. It's crewed 24/7, and I think this is a big benefit, especially here in the region, whereas the bigger an aircraft gets, all of us know this, it gets pulled by the owner on a short notice. And if you book an aircraft with us, in most cases where we don't have owner's approval, so on our own fleet, you can be sure that the aircraft is available when you have booked it.
Oh,
okay, Flying Group, principally a European company based out of Antwerp. Our revenues principally come from management, 50 aircraft. We've also got FBO, MRO up there. Here in region, our first year of operation, so aircraft management, a little bit of charter. So for us, charter last year, we don't have any charter aircraft in region, so we're working with local operators, I'll make that point. But also, the revenues we generated, some of it was from Europe, some of it was from here. Was it a good year? The answer is yes.
because you said you work with the local operators. I think we're not in competition with the local operators, like Mike Berry said in the first panel this morning. The fleet is not big enough for the charter demand here in the region, because the mentality might be a little bit different from owners in the Middle East, whereas you had a lot of new aircraft where owners might not be willing to give it out for charter compared to Europe. I think where the average fleet is a little bit older, and owners might have a different mentality, you know, more rational aircraft owners, and they say, you know, if I can recover some of the fixed cost, I put it out for charter. So I think even the foreign operators like an MHS Aviation being in the region, doing charter to and from the Middle East helps the Middle East business jet industry a lot, because you know, as we heard before, you know, charter might be the first step for an aircraft ownership.
So we've talked about the size of the market. Should we have a look at the two big markets? You can't really see this, I'm afraid. You just have to trust me. It's basically a slider that's been squashed on that. And this is showing Saudi flights. How has Saudi become a much larger market for you guys in the last year?
For us, it has become a better market, and I had dinner last night with my colleagues and one of the biggest brokers in the world who has an office here in Dubai. And their explanation was that, and I think it's the same as Captain Mohammed and Yusuf said before, people are looking for economies, right? They are looking more closely to the cost they're spending on the flight. And we see a downsizing out of Saudi Arabia, where people use predominantly our heavy jets and not necessarily ACJs, BBJs, and 650s. So this is why we have Saudi as our #1 market, compared to the Middle East, where people are spending more money on the same trip to Central Europe. Let's say they fly on Gulfstreams. We have our Global Express, our charter aircraft predominantly in the States and in the Caribbean. So this is why, for us, the Dubai itself is not as big as Saudi, but I think that's due to the fact, as I explained, of our fleet composition with heavy jets.
This is a data, sorry, I should have said, from Wings or Wing X, Richard Coe. Mark, what do you think is the main market out of Saudi? What's the main Saudi? How important is Saudi to your business?
Okay, we've seen a change in dynamic, and I've obviously been in the region a while, been watching things since the 4th of November 2017. From our side, we've seen maybe less governmental flights, less royal flights, maybe more smaller corporations booking. Again, the time efficiency angle is not lost on them, and I think it's being understood quite clearly, especially where the airlines don't serve as well. Also, we're seeing high net worth individuals. Now, I use the term high net worth rather than ultra high net worth. Actually, I think that's quite an interesting dynamic, an interesting change with millennials coming in. And whether they've been brought in through bloggers, which is a bit of a new term to me, or the Jet Smarter, or whatever, this to me is the new blood coming in. Are we going to see a return of government royal flying? I think Mr. Yusuf answered that one earlier, and the answer is yes. But that's our market at the moment.
Steffen, what sort of passengers are you seeing?
I just want to say, if I look at the amount of luggage they take with them, we assume that most of the flights are corporate flights or business flights, because it's not like you have 6 passengers with 100 suitcases. These days we have a lot of time, 5 or 4 or 6 passengers with like 6 suitcases, also doing round trips. So, I mean, we serve both the high net worth individual as well as corporates.
Okay, and I think I've got Dubai now, which again, or UAE, sorry. Someone on Slido has asked, are the main charter routes still heavily concentrated? What do you see as the top 10 or top 1 or 2? What's the key route when you know that?
For us, it's from Saudi as well as out of Dubai. It's either Switzerland, the final destination is either Switzerland or the UK.
Yeah, we're seeing London still there, and Zurich, Geneva, of course. But also, we're seeing inquiries locally for Europe, and obviously having a European fleet. I think the last trip I booked personally was to Ibiza, which is obviously a different market altogether. But again, if they wish to book through the Middle East office, they're based here, why not?
And so you're both optimistic about next year?
Yes, I'm optimistic. As you said before, to question the size of the market or the development, I mean, if I look at our own fleet, as long as I have more requests than I can serve with my charter fleet, there is no reason for being pessimistic. You know, would I buy 10 more Challengers these days to serve that market? Most probably not. But from an MHS perspective, I am positive. If we look at the amount of new aircraft coming to the market, I had the pleasure to attend the Maltese business event last week in Malta, and Jetcraft did a presentation and calling their numbers 11% of the worldwide fleet over the next 10 years will be delivered to the Middle East, and mainly heavy jets. So I think this is good news, which will take the fleet to almost 3,000 aircraft in 2016. And I think this is for the region, as I said, a really positive outlook.
See, Yusuf and Captain Mohammed talked about how the Saudi authorities are now getting involved in regulating the domestic fleet. Do you see that as a threat that other aviation authorities are going to want to reduce charter opportunities?
I mean, I don't see it as a threat. It's at the end, someone needs to pay for these repositioning flights. If we take Saudi, you know, we fly, today we fly to Riyadh, and with different passengers out of Jeddah tomorrow, we have to fly to Kuwait, reposition. At the end, we need to ask the passenger to pay for it, right? Because there is no such thing like a free lunch, so I can't pay for these flights. And if we saw the same over here in the Middle East, and I can't position the aircraft for different passengers from Dubai to Abu Dhabi, someone needs to pay for it, and most likely it's to the disadvantage of the customer.
From my side, I think always, you know, there's changing dynamics, opportunities, new challenges. I believe having to price back to base all the time doesn't work for anybody. And certainly the new world, you know, historically, go back 10 years, I was out of London and everything would be back to base from the operators. These days, if you price consistently back to base, it's very, very difficult. And I think that's why we've seen an increase in activity, particularly where operators actually own the fleet and can fully manage that positioning and the strategy behind that. If you are reliant on the owner's release and the owner may require the flight in a couple of days, you're always going to have to bring it back to base, because if not, who's going to pay that positioning?
But Alasdair, if I may compare this, it's 100% true what you said. If I compare this with other markets, I mean, I would not fly my Falcon to Moscow without a return flight, because I don't know what happens over the next 3 or 4 days. And the parking costs more than the margin I make on the charter flight to Moscow. So we are in a lucky position over here that the parking, crew accommodation, etc., are affordable for one-way flights. And we have a floating base, so we benefit from the fact that we can leave the aircraft here for a couple of days and wait for the next mission.
Just if I may, and is this far-fetched? I'm not sure, but it's certainly been talked about, and I mentioned analytics earlier, and I wonder whether, as we move forward to predictive analysis, and when we talk about, you know, okay, the flight to Moscow, if we know full well there's a good likelihood that within the next 3 days there will be traffic coming back, then it actually makes sense to be able to leave the aircraft there. So, and I think that's the next generation, is to be able to look one step ahead. And I've always said in FBO, you know, if you can predict the movements for the next week, you'd be a very rich man. But I think in charter, it is possible, and you do see the flow of traffic between certain regions at certain times.
I was talking to one of the big US operators, and I think anyone can pick out the top 20 days of the year, or even the top 50. They know the Super Bowl, it's usually fancy. They're going beyond that, it's almost impossible. And I wonder if there's enough data in business aviation that you'll ever be able to predict. There's so many variables.
You're right, there are a lot of variables, and when we look at technology and you know, maybe question later in terms of booking platforms and so forth, is there the option of being able to become more specific? I think if there's a physical demand, you know, in terms of the request, in terms of aircraft, age of aircraft, colour, then yeah, it becomes a lot easier to be able to predict and to provide that. But yeah, you're right, it's a complex one. But I think on certain routes, certain times a year, maybe it's only 50 days, but 50 days is better than no days.
There's a question. I'm guessing the person who's asked this question knows the answer. Do foreign operators have regulatory oversight of the region? If so, how and which authorities?
At the end of the day, you know, your regulatory authority, whether it's in Malta, whether it's in Saudi Arabia, you know, it's a worldwide regulation. So the answer is yes. You know, is it safe flying? The answer is yes. Is there a traffic right challenge? Then that's a different question.
Can, stick to the same thing, can UAE operators base their aircraft in the EU as a foreign operator in the same way foreign European operators can in the UAE? I think there's a thread here that I'll pick up.
Yeah, and I catch the thread, and I think I touched upon it earlier when we maybe spoke about a level playing field. And I think actually if you talk to most Alpha 6 operators, stand correction, that's actually all they're asking for is a level playing field. And go back historically, I've worked for Alpha 6 operators, I've worked for foreign operators, and I understand it, but I think the key words here are balance and a level playing field.
Okay, owner approvals and fleet control. What is the minimum lead time on a trip request, considering permitting needs across the Middle East these days?
I would say we can, maybe I should ask, I have my sales director in the back. I think we can do a flight in the out of the Middle East within like 4 hours. Correct? Because the aircraft is crewed, the crew is near the airport. I mean, this is not, thanks to the regulations here, not a big issue, right? It's with China and India, it's complete different ballgame.
With owner rates, how quickly can you get it?
I think always it's subject to the owner, you know, and I think this is one of the key things when you're talking to them in the very early stages of doing charter, and the way it works is clear, concise communication. And if they understand that, you know, it's mission critical, you need an answer within 1 hour, that's understood. Also, once they give owner's release, it cannot be retracted. And historically, I've actually taken aircraft off of charter when they have retracted it. To me, that's a red line that can't be crossed. It's a very difficult decision to make, but obviously you have a promise to the end user. So typically, you know, 1 to 2 hours, but again, if you've got an owner travelling and he's the only one that can make the decision, that's another story.
What we see is that this, the time to reply to the customer is much more critical, what we feel, than in the rest of the world. So if you get a booking request, they want to know it now. For whatever reasons, I don't know if they can't wait until the next morning, but our experience is, you know, the sooner you can get the reply, the better it is.
If I may, sometimes the hold-up is not necessarily on permits, but on payment, and that can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes.
It's still a big issue. Why has VistaJet been so successful in taking a bite to the local market? It's a question from VistaJet.
I think it probably goes back a little. It's a unique platform. Do I respect it? Absolutely. But in a way, it goes back to the comment of having control over your fleet, being able to control the positioning. I actually used to work for Bombardier Skyjet a long while ago before VistaJet bought the organisation. So I have a fair understanding of the dynamics, but control of fleet, nomadic fleet, one-way pricing would be my comment on the subject, but I guess probably the best people to ask is Vista.
Yeah, I see the same. I think what you said, control of the fleet, consistency in the product, and last but not least, I think they do a good service. So otherwise they would not be where they are. So I have huge respect for what they do, especially understanding that they do this with new assets, where I do my economics on pre-owned aircraft, and I can say, Yusuf and Captain Mohammed, you know, on pre-owned aircraft it works. If you do like 500 hours on a Challenger and 650 on a Global, you can earn the money for the depreciation. But with Vista, I mean, we compete with them sometimes on price with our pre-owned Global. So this is how I wonder how they do it, but the way they do it, it's good for the customer.
So many questions from the audience. Here's a nice one. Do you think cancellation fees charged for cancelled flights are fair? Sometimes 100% on short notice flight. Should there be standard for fees charged?
I mean, if I look, we have different cancellation policies. I mean, a good customer, it's the same like in your restaurant, right? If you cancel last minute, he still welcomes you next time. So we have different cancellation fees, and depending on the customer, you know, it might be that we only charge for the positioning flight. If it has happened already, it might be that we don't charge at all, because I think, you know, it's about sustainability on a customer relationship, and at the end it pays off if you don't ask for 100%. Also, you could do, but I think having strict cancellation fee, you know, is a little bit to educate also the broker as well as the broker to their customer, because otherwise we would see a mess. You know, you would just book, and then we as an operator, I mean, how should I get a global within 1 or 2 days out, understanding that the aircraft should make a margin of about 12,000 euros a day? I mean, how should that work?
My answer much the same. I think there has to be a standard within a contract. Again, if you've positioned to the destination to pick up the client, and then they've cancelled there, then yeah, you know, you've short of the catering, you've got 100% of the cost. But then again, you know, if it is a day before you haven't positioned, are you really going to charge 100% or 50%? And I think much goes there towards the client relationship, the relationship with the broker, or whether you could potentially use some of that money towards the next trip. Maybe, you know, you have the loyalty there. But I think many companies, successful companies these days, are looking towards long-term relationships rather than a very short-term win, which is really a win.
So one of the things we've seen an awful lot of is people trying to sell online charter, which makes a lot of sense. The apps, you know, attracting a new generation. But I think one of the problems is that we don't have a simplified contract. So de-icing fees aren't an issue here, but they are in other parts of the world. Cancellation fees. Would it be better if all the charter operators could get together and go, this is the standard terms? Because I think when you're comparing different quotes, you can easily miss the fact that, you know, cancellation fee can make a huge difference. A high, you know, or do you see what I mean? It's catering to this.
Understand the concept. I guess though, like service on board, it's one of the unique selling points potentially. Why should I have the same terms as Steffen, or why should Steffen have the same terms as me? If I could, you know, change things a little or do things a little differently.
Although it's a subtlety that probably would be missed by many buyers of charter.
You know, but I think we're still in the service industry. We serve our client to get safely and on time from A to B. And trying to put this in standards, in contracts, in an app, you know, it might work. And I know that Globair is doing this quite successfully for their Mustang fleet. But to be honest, there is not a lot to customize on a Mustang fleet, right? It is on time, maximum 4 passengers, and you know the range. But for any other flight, you know, we try, and I think we do the same, and most of the operators, you know, to make it a unique event. Also, the customer might fly every week. So I think the challenge for our whole industry is, you know, on one hand to be more advanced in technology, in data, in integration of different systems, from the 145 organization to the sales, to Foss, Rockwell Collins, inside the cockpit. And on the other hand, we should not forget that, you know, it's a people's business.
Okay. Do you see potential for mid-sized jets in the local charter market? It seems there could be a market which isn't being fulfilled due to lack of aircraft. And mid-sized aircraft, what is replacing the Hawkers? In the US and Europe, they're still the workhorses in the charter market.
I think it's a really good question, and I think we heard earlier from a number of parties the answer's probably not. I'm going to say something slightly different, and I think there is a market there, but it very much depends on pricing point. If you can only offer that size aircraft for a few $100 less than a Challenger, then there's no market at all. And I think, can I use the example? The Pilatus operation we've seen come, go, the pricing was too high, and I think they were the words of Neva rather than my words, as I recall. Consequently, I think on a light jet, maybe it's a mid-sized jet. If the pricing point is correct, and certainly with corporates, you know, if it's A to B, relatively short distance, from here, Riyadh, Jeddah, could there be a market? I think it's an interesting concept, and I think probably somebody will try it at some point.
I think if you price the mid-size aircraft in the way it should be priced, it's difficult, as you said, because for a little bit more money you get a Challenger. So why should you fly an Lear 60? I think if we compare the pricing in Europe, it's a buyer's market. It's not really, I mean, selling an XLS hour for €2,500 plus landing fee is not really what it should cost. You know, it should cost €3,500. Therefore, someone subsidized this operation and the industry on the mid-sized sector, and I think this is the aircraft owner. So if an aircraft owner has an aircraft here who is willing to take 100 or 200 hours of charter, that might work to set off some of the cost. But would we bring an own aircraft where we have to pay for the depreciation, everything 100%? Most likely not.
Okay, more questions. If there's a trend towards value downsizing, could traditional fractional or newer flight sharing models grow the market?
I think definitely yes. I think, and I was the one asking anonymously before, I think other industries like the car industry, very advanced, they have models, no matter if it's Sixt or BMW or Mercedes. And I think our industry, we will face that challenge that the next generation or the current generation is thinking about different models than just owning an asset. And it's not a question of status. Today it might be a status if you own an aircraft. Tomorrow it might be a status if you're a member of the most advanced club. I mean, I used to work for NetJets for almost 8 years, and when we started in Europe in 2000 or 2001, it was outstanding. No one could imagine that this will ever work, and it worked because there was just ownership. So will there be a sharing model? Maybe yes. I think we should at least be open for new ways of sharing that asset and making it more affordable or more accessible to everybody.
Yeah, I agree with Steffen. Probably not much more to add.
Okay. We're back to
Next time I go with you.
What backup option? We're going to go to charter broking in a big way soon. What backup options are available to single aircraft owners if the aircraft breaks during the itinerary? And what is the liability of the charter company? Any thoughts?
Okay, with this one, again, is there a rule that you can adopt for every flight? The answer is no. Again, with single aircraft, ethically, you need to back up, whether it's internal or external. So I'm not actually sure whether it makes any difference, if I'm being honest, Alasdair. If at the end of the day the client's booked from A to B, you're duty bound to do that or give them a refund. I think ethics is important, as well as contracts. Could you hide behind force majeure? I wouldn't. That's just me.
Okay, nice answer. Right, charter broking. Lots of questions. Mature charter markets, like the US, are in the hands of brokers, brackets, for better or worse, close brackets. Do you see brokerage in region taking hold?
I think it already has, frankly speaking. The percentage of, as an operator, of flights that come through a broker is significant. And I think brokers, there's a very big place for them in the industry. It's well established. I think here in the region we've got plenty of brokers, we've got plenty of operators. But also there's the place for direct bookings, and from an operator perspective, we welcome those as well.
Yeah, I think the same brokers for us are our biggest customers in the region, and maybe for NASJet, the bigger the aircraft gets, maybe the more likely you get a booking from a family office, from in the Royal direction. But on the heavy jet market, it's 95% of the bookings come through brokers.
Okay, more brokerage questions. From your perspective, what do you think is the job of a charter broker? What value can they bring to you or the passenger? Having said they're important, you're not going to be rude about them.
I think they are important. I think the whole industry missed an opportunity a little bit is when we started selling one-ways a couple of years ago and make the customer, so the passenger, actually feel that an empty leg is the real price of a flight. And I think the differentiation between an empty leg and a one-way, it's huge, as we know from an operator perspective. But for the broker, actually, they tend to sell, every one-way flight as an empty deck and puts the operator heavily under pressure from a price perspective. So I think this was a missed opportunity, and it hurts everybody in our industry.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't ask you. What value do brokers bring?
Okay, I'd probably go for two areas here in particular. One is the communication with the client, making them understand, sharing with them information. There's a lot that goes on. It's not just a straightforward booking. There's a lot of understanding that needs to happen prior to that booking coming in, and making sure they end up with the right product. Again, what we all want is a satisfied end client, and I think the brokers bring superb value there. And again, the other one I'd probably mention is negotiation, should something not go quite to plan. Again, they're looking after the client's interests, and in a way, if they're looking after the client's interests, they're looking after our interests.
Okay, one word answer. Do you prefer to do business, or one acronym answer? Do you prefer to do business B2B or B2C?
I would start with B2B.
You'd rather deal with the broker?
Yes, I think our organization is not set up to do as you said, that customer handling, that communication on a flight. I mean, I think when we have like 20 phone calls and emails towards a broker, the broker might have 50 towards the customer because they filter already quite heavily. They go out and meet their owners, their customers. I mean, we couldn't do this. I could not build up that customer relationship in foreign regions.
That was a one-word answer?
It was a one-word.
B2B.
And as well, I did actually forget.
One word. But 90% of our bookings do come through the broker market.
Okay. Is MHS basing aircraft in the UAE? You don't have base?
I mean, we don't have it. I have one at the moment here, so if anybody needs a flight as of tomorrow, Falcon 2000 is available for you. We have actually an aircraft here every week, but it's not based. As we said before, we have a floating fleet. We do one-ways most of the time. The aircraft waits here for the next mission. Do we consider with the new GACA rules maybe going with a local operator, with a Saudi operator, and do a wet lease agreement to offer more capacity, supplemental capacity to, for example, NASJet? Yes, why not? Yusuf and myself, we discussed this already.
By the way, if you charter that aircraft out, I want commission on it, standard broker rate, like 20%. How do you, talking about that, have you experimented with commission models, and what do you find works best? I guess it's commission to broker. Yes, commission for me. I think it's an audience question, but I think commission for brokers.
It's a good question here. I've always believed in keeping it transparent and very open. I think there's maybe a place for a loyalty program in the future. I think that's something that maybe has merit. But at the end of the day, I think keep it net, pass it on, and then it's an open market because, again, otherwise your pricing models become different to each broker.
Okay. Question from James Harding. Do you see cabin connectivity as a deal breaker for customers? Is KA a minimum or still getting away with sort of broadband?
I think on the ultra long range aircraft, it is very important, especially here in Dubai. As I said, because they tend to spend more money on the same flight than out of Kuwait or out of Saudi these days. They expect a younger year of manufacturing, and they expect actually the internet on board of the aircraft.
I very much agree. I think Wi-Fi these days is a need rather than a want for many passengers. And whether you're flying Alasdair economy, Emirates economy, you've got access to Wi-Fi. Is it as quick as KA? The answer's no, but you have connectivity. And I think that's one of our challenges within the industry. Not necessarily on new aircraft, that's pretty easy, but on older aircraft, the cost of retrospectively fitting the hardware. We've heard today, maybe we didn't hear hard numbers, but you're looking anywhere between $200 and $1 million. That's a lot of money in a marginal business for an operator to pay. Then in addition to that, you've obviously got the monthly charge. One of the positive things I heard, a couple of things I heard, one was that the systems these days are future-proof, which in terms of hardware is really important. So it's a one-time investment rather than having 2 years, 3 years down the road to put on more hardware. I think there'll be a software update, of course. And then you've got the monthly fees, which is much better than a usage fee in my mind. But if you've got 20k there as well to swallow or to pass on, again, that's quite a number. So I think there is an opportunity there. The other one I picked up from Jim and James earlier, and I hadn't necessarily put this into the same equation, but operational efficiency, safety, and maintenance efficiencies that could come through the system may well give that cost offset. But I think this is a really big challenge for the industry, and I think we've still got another couple of steps to go in making that viable.
Question from someone launching a competitor to Aviation. What is your preferred platform to communicate with brokers? Aviation has run a monopoly in the past. Their prices have increased.
We're happy with the Avinode application. Could it be enhanced if Avinode were here? I don't think they are. Okay, cool. I think there is, maybe another step, another evolution to that in the preferences, in the pricing. The accuracy of the pricing, maybe this is actually aimed back at us as the operators to be more refined in the pricing. Is it a great platform? The answer is yes. I think its success has spoken for itself. We've seen, but I think there is another step, and I touched upon it earlier in terms of age of aircraft, interior selection. I don't think any platform will ever do away with the customer interface. I think that's there. It's a very bespoke personal business. That's absolutely key, because how at the end of the day can you have in there that the preference of the client is a dog-friendly crew or a Russian flight attendant? I think, as you said earlier, step too far, never going to happen. But it's a great platform. Is there other platforms? I think there's a couple being launched.
You think the dog speaks Russian?
No.
If I may add, I think for us it's the same. I mean, we work on Avinode and Scadero. However, it has been reduced, the functionality. I think most of it is now down to availability and location of the aircraft, because no matter how good you work on your pricing engine, if it's in Leon, if it's in FOSS, if it's in Flex, whichever scheduling system you use, and you take the data automatically into Avinode or Scadero, at the end it's a negotiation anyway, because the broker calls you, you might have priced it to London for 42,000, he says I have an offer on the same aircraft type for 39, take it or leave it. So no matter how advanced the pricing engine is, it's just really for the brokers to see where is the aircraft and is the aircraft available. And I think with ADS-B out being mandatory in the market, it will be less a hurdle for a new platform or technology to enter the market, because getting aircraft locations is actually not that difficult as of January next year, where in most countries ADS-B out becomes mandatory.
Okay, quick answers then. Is giving a broker marketing exclusivity for one of your aircraft a good deal for an operator? / is it easy to manage? Yes, no?
No.
No.
Great. Yes, no. I know what you're going to answer on this one. Are the days of charter companies owning aircraft gone?
No.
Yes.
It's not a model for us, though, that's for sure.
Is it?
I don't. There's a place for everything. Yes and no.
You can't have to. Yes. Okay. How do you manage relationship with brokers with the new trend of operators subchartering in an effort to keep a customer? So if you're subchartering, are you now a broker, so you're now competing with your customers?
So we try to avoid the subcharter for the sake of what we just said, customer relationship. If it's a booked flight and we have an AOG, I mean, we go back to the broker and say we have that aircraft found for you, and in a lot of cases the broker books it himself, because we don't want to make any margin on the flight which our aircraft messed up or broke down. So.
Okay. Final question about the size of the market. Is the majority of the business jet traffic in the Middle East from the Middle East out or into the Middle East? I can't work that one out.
Struggling with that one as well.
So GE Do you get better charter revenues coming in and people, or do people fly in and out?
I have to say I haven't analysed that trend. You know, you get the returns, you get the one-ways.
Yeah. Any old school questions or comments? I wasn't actually looking at you particularly, Richard. Great. Final question. When will robots replace charter brokers?
One-word answer? Never. I honestly don't think it's going to happen. Why? My comment earlier, it's a personal business. Somebody once said to me, this business is about aeroplanes. It's not, it's about people.
The same, I think first we replace the second pilot in the cockpit, and this will last another 15 to 20 years, and then we'll see.
Okay, thank you.